Welcome to our channel. Why does God seem harsher in the Old Testament compared to the New Testament? This question comes up often because when people read the Bible they notice differences in tone and action between the two main sections. In the Old Testament we see God's judgment laws and wars. In the New Testament we see Jesus teaching love, grace and forgiveness. So why the difference? First, we need to remember that God does not change. Malachi 3:6 says, "I the Lord do not change." Hebrews 13:8 says, Jesus Christ is the same yesterday and today and forever. That means the God of the Old Testament is the same as the God of the New Testament. The Old Testament reveals God's holiness and justice. God gave the law to show people what was right and wrong and how serious sin is. His actions, including judgment, were often meant to protect people from greater evil or to carry out justice against wickedness. For example, in Genesis 6, God sent the flood because the earth was filled with violence. In Deuteronomy 9:5 God says, He drove out nations not because Israel was righteous, but because of the wickedness of those nations. God was acting as a just judge. But the Old Testament also shows God's mercy. Psalm 103:8 says the Lord is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love. Even in the Old Testament God forgave sins, showed patience, and sent prophets to call people back to Him again and again. In the New Testament we see the fulfillment of God's plan through Jesus. Jesus came to take the punishment for sin on Himself so that people could be forgiven through grace rather than law. John 1:17 says the law was given through Moses. Grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. The New Testament does not replace God's justice. It reveals the way God satisfied His justice through the sacrifice of His Son. Romans 5:8 says, God demonstrates His own love for us in this: while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. So why does God seem harsher in the Old Testament? Because we see more of His justice on display before Jesus came. But the same holy, loving and just God is present throughout the entire Bible, showing both judgment and mercy from beginning to end. Stay curious, stay faithful, and keep exploring.